newspaper about food connected to climate, environment, animal rights, and health. And so that's it. I will give you my card when you leave. You don't have it, so you can look up the newspaper there. And we also have a cooperation with Animal Rebellion.
Yes.
Which I'm also a member of course.
Yes, important member. Yeah, we're all important members. I'm Jonathan. Have been starting up Animal Rebellion together with many in this room. Animal Rebellion, and we are actually the ones who are hosting this. I mean, you have. We have the contact with Studiefrämjandet, so that's why we are here today. Animal Rebellion comes from Extinction Rebellion, if you know Extinction Rebellion, and we are trying to promote the transition to a plant-based food system. So help our politicians so they cannot do other but promote to speed up the transition to a plant-based. And we are doing this through actions, and we are doing in protests, and we try to be just like Extinction Rebellion. We want to be as many as possible when we do our actions, because it has been seen that the more you are, the more effectful it is. So if you want to help us to speed up the transition, it can be like in schools, Swedish companies, hospitals. You can join us and join our actions, our campaigns, protests. We don't have a card yet, but you will find us. Animal Rebellion, Stockholm. And you can.
I'll pay for it.
Sorry?
I will pay for it through Monte Clement.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
But we don't have to pay.
Yes, when I ordered the cars.
Ah, okay.
So
Okay.
I ordered them for you, for us.
Okay, we can.
Yes.
Okay. Well. And we didn't.
Yes. We should introduce Peter. We forgot the name.
I can do that some
This
that's
man
fine.
has been inviting himself.
Cool.
He will present himself.
All right, excellent. All right. Well, I just got notice 3 minutes ago that we're doing this in English instead, and I have prepared all the slides, and now I'm changing everything on live here. So give me 1 minute, and then I'll start. I'm looking at the screen while I'm talking to you, which is extremely rude, and I apologize for that. But I will focus on you just as soon as I'm ready with my presentation. 1 minute, and then we'll start. Okay?
Can I use that 1 minute to say something about Animal Rebellion?
Yeah.
You don't have to be vegan or vegetarian to be part of Animal Rebellion. So you don't have to worry. The more people we are who care about the environment and what we eat and the animals, the better. And things will change.
Because basically this is because it's not an animal rights movement, it's a ecological, it's a climate movement. So we're trying to make actual changes.
I know.
Because it's already, we were in a political debate, discussion some weeks ago. Politicians are already talking about this. How we have Swedish companies producing oat milk, we have Swedish, there are so many things that we could promote and try to show the positive and good future that we could go to. So yeah, it's a
So
system.
they start using cows for leather, that's why.
No,
Instead.
no, because
How did you make
all,
this conclusion?
no,
Because it's not in the food
Nikos,
system.
Nikos, all animal agriculture destroys ecosystems. And I think there's no need. It's extremely unlikely that we will get back. You know, just,
I agree.
yeah,
Yeah, we're just speeding up the whole
Yeah.
process. Yeah.
yeah.
So we have yes, and we have our next meeting on Wednesday on Café Stream. Yeah, it's I don't remember the address, but it's on Söder. The address is
It's almost in it's the next
Skånegatan,
block from Skånegatan.
Nytorgsgatan är 6 o'clock in the basement, in there, in Lower Korea. So you're all welcome.
I'll be cooking right
Really?
Tuesday. I'm just going to see my granddaughter.
All right.
Just have a chicken hot, so.
Oh.
Now I am ready.
Very good.
Thank you for coming here. I'm going to talk about the environmental impact of meat. This presentation is a little bit more than an hour long. It's going to be 90% environment. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Of course, ethics comes in, and there's a little bit of health at the end also, but the focus is 90% on environment. And the main idea of this speech is very, very simple. I'm going to introduce that the concept, the action of eating animals produces, wastes resources, and it produces pollution. And that's the basis of all our environmental problems. Either we're releasing something, like carbon dioxide, for example, or we're wasting something, like water. And that's what I'm going to talk about. But that's the general idea. So if you remember one thing, it's more wasteful and it pollutes more. That's what I'm going to be talking about. And I'm going to try to prove that. Is it flickering or is it?
Yeah, it's really.
Okay. I see something in the corner of my eye. All right. So I'm going to do that by talking about a lot of different examples. I'm going to be talking about greenhouse gases, of course. Flickering again. I can switch to another outlet here. So
Maybe if you put the table on the table so it doesn't hang.
yeah. Let me try that. Because I'm going to get annoyed by that. Even if you're much more polite, then that's good. There we go. And of course, yes, this shouldn't hang. Let's see if we can put myself. You just hold that.
Just over a little over an
Just
hour.
for a bit more than an hour. That's okay. All right. We're now against. All right. No. All right. Otherwise, we'll just gather around my screen here.
Yeah.
Okay, right? Just all close up together. That would be nice, right? All right. So let's get back to the program here. We're going to be talking about greenhouse gases, of course. We're going to be talking about water, land usage, wild animals, of course, air pollution, and fish. So, but first, let's step back and introduce myself, since nobody else did it for me. My name is Peter Kalmström. I'm the editor-in-chief of Studiefrämjandet. I'm very, very lucky because my entire family is vegan. And of course, my grandmother went vegan when she was 99, so it's never too late. And most of you are much younger than that. So I'm a writer. I've published lots and lots of articles in Swedish newspapers. I'm a member of a bunch of different organizations. I'm the president of the World Vegan Organization, the Spain chapter. I'm also an activist. I often stand with the sign, protesting and so on. But now we're going to talk about the environment. And this is, of course, a very, very current subject. You remember this, right? This happened on the 12th of November. So almost, 3 months ago now? Yeah, more than 3 months ago. And The Guardian summarized the situation like this. Our house is on fire. Right? So there's no discussion anymore. We've decided that. That's democratically decided our house is on fire. So, who can tell me their favorite strong thing that the European Parliament has done in the 3 months? Your favorites. Give me your top 10. Top 5. Top 3, please. Top 1, exactly. They haven't done a single thing, right? Nothing of significance. They have made some plans for the future, but nothing of emergency level. They haven't done a single thing, right? Another thing in politics that we should talk about is this thing. Right. Göran Persson thinks that we are out to kill the cows. He's saying here in Swedish that the cows did not cause the climate crisis. And of course, no, that's not what we're claiming either. He's also claiming here that if we shoot the cows, we shoot ourselves. So my message here today is, please, do not shoot the cows, okay? That's not my message. we will not solve the climate crisis by killing cows. That's quite the contrary. And just the other week, Trump did the same thing. So Göran Persson and Trump are saying exactly the same thing in defense of the animal agriculture industry. Right? This is quite scary. Yeah. They want to kill our cows. But that's not what we want, of course. Right? But what we are against, we're not against the animals, we're against the animal industry. We're against the pig industry, of course. We're against, yes, the cattle industry, the poultry industry. They kill 100 million of birds in Sweden every year. Sheep, of course, produce a lot of different problems. This is just, pointing out that there are a lot of problems with all of these, with the way we treat all of these animals. It produces lots of different problems. It's rather easy to ridicule this. It's just the cows farting, right? How bad can the cow farts be? If that was the only problem, it wouldn't be a problem. If it was only cows, if it was only farting, and if we didn't, do all the other things with them, it wouldn't be a problem. But who's that?
It's also burping.
Also burping, yes, it's the other side also, yes. Comes out methane, all. Fish, we're going to talk about that also. It does also creates a lot of different problems. But let's start from the beginning. Let's start with the most prominent thing that we're talking about all the time. It's greenhouse gases. You've all seen this curve. It's called the Keeling curve. This variant has the curve 1,000 years into the past. And as you see, it's been rather stable. And then in the 1950s or so, it started skyrocketing. Right? Very, very clear. Same thing with nitrous dioxide. Let me just close that thing. It's annoying me. Okay, good. All right. Nitrous dioxide, same thing. 1,000 years, rather stable. And then 1950, it skyrocketed, right? Methane, same thing, rather stable for 1,000 years. And then it skyrocketed.
This is the emission.
No, this is the level. This is the part per million in the atmosphere. Very good that you're asking that question. The difference with this graph as compared to the other ones is the scale. You see, this is 700. It's tripled. The other ones have risen quite a bit. This one has tripled. And we all know that methane is the most dangerous greenhouse gas. And this has tripled. It's close to 3,000. It's also the fastest one to get down. It makes a huge difference if we can make that go down. And it's animal agriculture, of course, causing this, and it's also a lot of other things. But animal agriculture is the one that we can change quickly and rapidly. I might have to go back and forth to the Swedish presentation that I had prepared, because I have some other slides there that are not translated to English yet, so I might have to switch back and forth a bit. Temperature, same thing, of course, stable, up and down a little bit. It was cold in the 1600s, but then, of course, very clear in the 1950s, it started skyrocketing. Sea level, same thing, it's millimeters here, so small changes so far, but a very, very clear trend, right? Oxygen. Going down. Good. No, wait. What? No. That's not good. All the other curves are going up. So no. Oxygen, we need that, right? We need. It's very, very serious. Why are you laughing? Sorry. Anyhow, it's very serious, right? It's going down. It's very clear. Why is it going down? What are we doing? Where's the oxygen coming from? Trees. Exactly. What are we doing with the trees?
Deforestation.
And of course, the other half is coming from the oceans. Very clear. We're destroying all the sources of oxygen. Very clear. It's a rather recent trend since 1995, but it's a very, very clear. It's small volumes so far, but it's a very clear trend. So this is our scorecard. This is our dashboard. Corporate organizations wants this kind of scorecard. How are we doing? All right. So which one of these should we fix first? What do you think? Exactly. We can't fix one. That's a stupid question, right? We can't fix one of them. They are all connected, of course. Right? So let's focus on carbon dioxide, because that's the one we talked the most about. This one is this curve goes 400,000 years back into the past. And as you see, it's been going up and down between 280 and 180. So there has been a change, but this is not normal. And why are we talking about 400,000 years? Well, that's how long human beings have been living on this planet, or something like human beings at least. The whole Homo species. It's about 400,000 years old. So this is the normal for us, 180 to 280? This is not. There is an organization saying 350. That's normal. That we can sustain. 350.org, you can, so another environmental organization that says that 350, that we can sustain that. But nobody is claiming that 416, which is the current number. You all saw that in the news, right? It was all over the news. No, it was not all over the news. Just checking that you're all awake here. If you're following Greta on Twitter, you saw it. She posted it. But none of the major newscasts showed it. It was not in the papers. It was not in the TV news. It was the first time this happened in 40 million years. So, I mean, it happens all the time, right? It's very, very serious. 416 is not normal. And the record, by the way, happened 2 weeks ago now. Usually the record happens in May. So if we break the record every year, usually it happens in May. Now it happened in February. So there will be more records, most likely. Did you see that again? 416 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. 2 weeks ago.
And it usually happens in
May. No. The level of concentration. All of this is the concentration. How much carbon dioxide is there in the air?
It's always higher than it ever was.
Yes. Higher than last year. Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's the important thing. Yes, you're absolutely right. Well, and part of the problem, and the main part of the problem, is that we're still continuing to emit. We're emitting more and more.
Yes, and we can take advantage of the high.
Exactly. So yeah, we can start doing things there also. Now I want to switch back to the Swedish presentation because I have a few slides there. I will lose tempo a bit here, but bear with me, please. I have a few slides in Swedish here that I want to. Go ahead. There will be positive things in the end. I promise. Yes, there will be. After an hour of this, then you'll get some positive. Yes. If you can stand it that long, then yeah. All right. So I wanted to show this. The 2 Swedish slides here also that I wanted to show. Slide. There we go. Yeah, this is of course happening in Sweden also. That's my main point there. And this one I wanted to mention. This is the latest data from the Swedish Statistiska centralbyrån. They claim that it's risen with 1.11%. Now we're talking about emissions, how much we're releasing into the atmosphere. And the increase is due to the personal transports of individuals. Hushållens persontransporter. And that's cars and transports and flying and those kind of things. And those are the kind of things that we have known for 50 years, that those are bad for the environment, right? That's not news. That's not arguable. Everybody knows that. We've been doing the ethanol things. We have been doing the electric car things. We've been doing public transport to get the personal transports down, right? So we've been working on that for decades, and it's still increasing. Yeah. All right. That was the Swedish slides that I wanted to show. Yeah, let's go back to the.
Can you continue on the Swedish slides and say in
I can, of course, yeah. That work for everybody? So I don't have to flip back and forth, yeah. Because I have a bit more slides in the Swedish because I was working on that later. I keep adding to these things as the news, get worse and so. Sorry. Yeah, there are some English in the Swedish also, so it's a. Well, anyhow, this is an illustration of the change between 1850 and 2018. And yeah, you saw that one. So also, of course, this is a picture of 2018, the entire year. As you see, it was much redder all over the world than it should be. It should be about half and half because these are averages over the year. And of course, the Arctic and the Antarctic are the worst problem. This one was released by Swedish Meteorological Service, SMHI, just a few days ago. And as you see, these are the average temperatures in January over the entire country. And as you see on the scale here, it's 6, 7, 8 degrees. Over, it's 9 in some places even, or 10 even there, I think. But anyhow, it's way above. This is not normal at all, right? And this is January 2020. This one is also brand new. This is in Turkey. The right one is in Turkey. They had a snowstorm there just a few days ago. And this one is on the left here. That's from Iran. They had 6 meters of snow in Iran last week. Do you think they were ready for 6 meters of snow in Iran? Of course not.
Not even shooting.
Not exactly, nobody is, but yeah. This one is also a brand new slide. 18th February, 20 degrees. It was 20 degrees in Antarctica, warmer than Dubai. This was last 18th of January, February. It was 2 days ago. So this is going on right now. This is an emergency. The house is on fire. We can see the signs, right? But the big question is, of course, where are we going? What's going to happen now? We are about here. It's arguable where we are. We're somewhere around here, above 1 degree. The consensus is 1.1 degrees. But the question is, where are we going? If we keep all the promises we made in the Paris Agreement 5 years ago, right? Then we are going to end up here, slightly above 2 degrees. And that looks rather stable, right? So, which are your favorite countries that have kept the promises they made 5 years ago? Nope, that's the wrong answer. Which countries have kept their promises? Anybody?
No.
0 is the right answer. Give him a star. Not a single country has kept their promises. They're all breaking it. And it's been 5 years now. We don't have that many years. 5 years is a long time in this context. Right? So we're going straight up. We're following this, the worst case scenario. Or, as they call it, business as usual. Right? Also, you might remember that 5 years ago, during the Paris Agreement discussions, the 126, I'll be happy to share these slides, by the way, so you can get the original, but yeah, feel free. The 126 poorest nations in the world, they agreed, please, let's agree on 1.5 degrees. Let's make the agreement 1.5, please. Pretty please. You remember what the agreement was? 2 degrees, of course, it was 2 degrees. We ignored the 126 poorest nations. The 126 poorest nations, of course, know they're not going to have an easy time to accommodate all these changes. Right? Go ahead.
Can I just ask, because I have heard like India was pushing back because they have like people with no electricity and stuff like that, and they were concerned about the welfare of the people before everything like getting to this degree. So how is that playing out with all these agreements? If you know, like.
Yeah. It's I can't really answer that.
Yeah.
It's a way too big question, really. But it's not playing out well. I mean, Modi, who is the president in India right now, is much a populist, like many like him. They look at him like they look on Bolsonaro or Trump or other people of that nature. And he's doing some things that are really good and popular, and some things that are really bad. But mostly he's trying to grow the economy. That's his main focus. It's not an environmental focus in any way. On the other hand, India is, I've been working in India for quite a long time. I mean, there's so much happening in India, and they're seeing the problem every day in India. So there are rapid changes being made on local level, on NGO levels, and stuff like that. But that's subject of another lecture.
Yeah.
I think.
So these would be only just workarounds rather than a fix.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's no fix.
Yeah.
In India nor anywhere.
I mean, like
Yeah.
a long-term plan
there is no such long term. I mean, if you look at China, for example, they do actually have plans, long term plans. They are the only country in the world that actually has a plan for cutting down on meat consumption. That's the only country. India is a democracy. They do not make long term plans. They argue. I'm all for democracy, of course, but there's nobody that has the power to make a long term plan for India, nor any other country, by the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's part of the problem. All right. So when we're looking at what's the future going to be like, then we are using very strong words. The scientists that are discussing this are using very strong words. They're using, for example, uninhabitable. Large areas of the planet will be uninhabitable for human beings. This is a map of the world at 4 degrees, which a scientist has done, tried to analyze what will be the consequences. And yes, that's the proper reaction right there. Something like that. This is a rather good scenario. This is where we, adapt to 4 degrees. We have put up solar energy panels all over Sahara. So this is a rather good scenario. We've also accommodated here up in the north. Most of the people live here. So most of the people of Southern Europe and Asia and Middle East and Africa, they live in Scandinavia now. Welcome, neighbors. Right?
So this 4 degrees warmer is in how much? We are talking about 2050 or?
Well, that we don't know. We don't know how fast it's going to be. But if you look there, it's going to be, if you're there, then you're somewhere in 2060. Yeah, but we don't know how fast that's going to be. So yeah, that's a good question. And of course, we can do a whole lecture on this one alone. But yeah, you see, it's going to have really, really big consequences for the planet and for us living there. They're also talking about, do you have a question? No. All right. Also growing, conventional growing. All our civilizations depend on us planting something, maybe watering. In most parts of the world we water, and then waiting, and then harvesting, and then eating, and then doing the same thing all over again. That was the Babylonians started with oats. That was the Chinese started with rice. That's what started with the Mayans with maize and all kinds of other things. Right? So that's the basis of our civilization. We didn't start any civilizations based on hunting or gathering. That wasn't civilization. That was human beings, yes. But it wasn't civilization, it wasn't population growth, and all kinds of things. This has never happened. This is the first time this happened in human history, of course. They're talking a lot about catastrophes of different kinds. They're talking about extinctions of animals, of course. They're talking about superstorms. This looks like a disaster movie, or clips from a disaster movie. It's not. This is things that's already happening or has happened at 1.5 degrees. They're 1.1 degrees above normal, right? You know what all disaster movies start with? Anybody enjoy disaster movies? Not anymore, right? No. They start with people ignoring the scientists, right? The scientist explains the problem, then we ignore him, and then the problem comes, right? That's what we've been doing. That's exactly what we've been doing for 50 years now, right? We know what we're going to do. We're going to cut down on our greenhouse gas emissions, right? We're going to cut down on our driving, our cars, our lorries, our boats, and our flights, of course. So let's stay here in Stockholm. Let's bicycle from now on, or walk, right? And let's just eat food produced in Stockholm, right? Will that solve the problem? Will it get us to the promised 0 emissions by 2050? You're absolutely right. It will get us to 13%, right? And flights, international flights are not even mentioned in the Paris Agreement. They're totally ignored. In Sweden, that's about 10% that we're ignoring right there, of the Swedish emissions, right? In the world, it's about 1 to 2%. So it's not that much, but we can't ignore 1 to 2%. We have to count every percent, right? We can't ignore anything. We cannot close our eyes. We have to get 100%, right? We cannot ignore, now I'm coming to the core here. We cannot ignore animal industry, right? Animal industry counts for at least 14.5%. That's the lowest number out there, right? There are others that claim, like World Watch Institute, they claim 51%. Well, one of the problems with this counting is soy production, for example, right? You do that. Is that environment? Or is that farming? Or is that animal farming? Or is it transportation because you put that on a boat somewhere and load it over? So which part is directly animal farming? It's all of those. It's transport also, right? And it's farming and it's animal farming and everything. So how do you divide these things? It's bookkeeping, right? All right. So let's look specifically at Sweden, right? This is this latest data for our consumption in Sweden. As you see, we are consuming about 16% of our consumption-based carbon emissions are from our eating. So being vegan is an important thing. It's not the only thing, of course, but this is the easiest one to change.
Yeah.
Where the official or common consumption, the state consumption, we can vote once every 4 years or so on. And our investments, of course, we should invest in sustainable things. Our transports, yeah, we change cars now and then. Of course, we should try to transport ourselves. But this one is really easy to change. But we need to keep in mind that we are at 10.5 tons of carbon emissions per person every year in Sweden. And the question is, what is sustainable? We don't really know what's sustainable. But the guesses are that 1.5 is sustainable, right? There's a TV series, a Swedish TV series called Zero Impact, where they try to get ordinary Swedish people to get down to 1.5 tons per year. It's rather good. It's like 3 or 4 years old now. It's really good. But I maintain that this part is the easiest one to change. So if you go to a plant-based diet, then you can cut down about 1.5. So you'll still have 9 to go, right? Or what is it? 7.5 to go. But it's an easy thing to do. And it's also going to solve a lot of other. Now we're only talking about greenhouse gas emissions. This numbers, by the way, the 15% or the 14.5%, it's not just my idea. This is from Jordbruksverket. This is an article a few years ago saying about the same thing, right? So we need to look at, of course, at what we eat and how much carbon emissions those things are giving. These are the latest numbers from 2017. No, sorry, they're from 2019. They're right now, right new. From SLU.
18 or
19. Yeah, so they're brand new from SLU. Livscykelanalys. That's what they also. So they look at everything in there. All right. So this is Swedish numbers, official numbers, and as we see, there is a clear trend there. If we're watching advertisement on Swedish TV, the message is clear, right? Eat Swedish chicken, right? That's what we're seeing every day. It's lean and it's much, much better than those other alternatives, right? But, of course, we can't hide half the picture, right? We need to look at the entire picture. All of it. And then it's, there are not small differences here. It's 0.1 on the potatoes. Potatoes is a good, solid Swedish stock, right? That's what built our civilization. That's what made, yeah. Well, vodka. As you see, compared to egg, it's 14 times worse. Compare it to Bregott-fabriken, right? It's 270 times worse in terms of carbon.
Not set there, it includes dairy or?
Yeah, grädde is there, that's dairy, that's
Right.
green. And dairy is not in this graph.
Right.
But next one here has a lot more of these.
Okay.
So this one, if you want to dig deeper into this, and you want to have all the facts on why is this happening, these data, these example data are the ones that World Wildlife Federation uses.
Right.
And they in turn use SLU for their data. So that's why it shows these examples. And one of the things that I want to point out here in terms of I forgot it. All right, let's move on. So if you want to look at more depth in this, I would recommend this website here. This is a gold mine, Our World in Data. Really, really good one. And yeah, one of the things I wanted to add here also was this is carbon dioxide per kilo, of course. So when you drag up these numbers, everybody's going to say, aha, but how about the protein, right? So if you twist it around and look at carbon emissions per protein instead, which our World in Data has done, you can get those data also, then you will see that yes, of course, beef is not as bad when you're looking at protein, as if we wanted more protein in our diet. We do not need more protein in our diet. What people are actually looking, or sorry, what people are actually missing in their diet is fiber, right? That's what people are actually dying from. Protein deficiency, 0. Fiber deficiency, lots of people, right? So if you twist this around and put fiber in there, how much fiber do the red ones contain? Nada. So it's infinity. I can't do a graph on that. I'm sorry. It doesn't work, right? So look at this one. Of course, it's a very, very clear picture. And also from an animal rights perspective, when we're talking about that, a lot of people are interested in that also, not just, it's actually the animals that we treat the worst. Of course, the hen and the chickens and the pigs, they are actually better for the environment, or less bad for the environment. So the more we press the animals into a barn, the better it is for the environment. So of course we can't end up in that discussion, because then we'll end up talking about eating bugs and pressing millions and billions of bugs into a barn or something. That will be much better. Because we have to have the whole, we have to look at everything, right? But of course the environment is very important, but it's not everything. All right, please feel free to look at this one also. That's what I wanted to say about greenhouse gases. Any questions on greenhouse gases? All right. Yes, go ahead.
What about bug insects?
Yeah. I don't think they're in here because it hasn't, from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective, it is better or less bad, because that's what we need to get away from this. This is environmentally friendly. Of course, even the potatoes are not environmentally friendly. They're not a plus, they're better than, less bad than. So yes, eating bugs is less bad than eating chickens and eggs in that sense, because they are better at transforming.
I think they are better than the.
I think they're about here or something, 0.5. I think so. I've seen some of that. But the main thing is, we've done this. We know that this works. We know that that's baljväxter. We know that kål, cabbage, for example, works very, very well in Sweden. We have not done insects at scale, so we don't know what's going to happen there. And this is only greenhouse gas emissions. We have other problems with insects also. Go ahead.
What other problems do you have?
Well, when you press in living beings in a barn, you're going to get disease. No matter what you do. Yeah. So that's the main problem. So we don't know what is going to happen if we press. Well, we have done it with silkworms. We've done it with bees, and we know that they're having problems with both those types of insects. So it does create side problems. But insects for food, we have not done that yet. So it's a bad track. We know that insects, if we press lots of vegetables into a barn, that's fine, right? Go ahead. Sorry.
So I have the same question that you had about English, but about mussels.
Mussels, yeah.
Yes. So some people say they are better for the environment than
Yeah.
any
Well,
other animal.
well, animals are good for the environment. Remember, they always are.
Okay.
But you're talking about animal flesh, or
Animal agriculture.
yeah, exactly. So yes, they are good for the environment. They can do a lot of good for the water. They can clean the water and stuff like that. But there's no benefit for us humans to eat any animals, even those. But of course, but they do have ganglia. Now we're getting into ethics.
Yes.
But they do have ganglia, so they have something like a nerve system. So there's considerable evidence that they can suffer, which of course potatoes cannot. They do not have a nerve system and so on. So out of an environmental perspective, maybe mussels are good. We know that they're good alive. They might be better or less bad than other things, but there's no reason. And the health problems with muscles are the same. The whole, cholesterol and no fiber and all that is the same for muscles also. Good question, thank you. You had a question also.
The 14.5 or 15%. Do you know how much they consider in the production? Like, is it? I mean, you said it's not the whole life cycle, but.
This is the whole life cycle. Well, yeah. No, I don't know how they're counting. The report that number builds on is called the long shadow. Yes, of industry.
Livestock.
Long shadow of livestock is from 2006. So there you can find exactly how they count it.
Okay.
And I would also recommend the arguments from World Watch Institute that are talking about the 51%.
Yes.
Because when that number came out, they were largely dismissed, that they're counting wrong. But they've just recently did a reanalysis of that number, and they're reaffirming their belief in that number, that it's much, much higher.
This is World Watch Institute.
World Watch Institute, I think those are the ones that did it. She has it?
Okay.
Yeah, very good.
Not the most.
Yeah. So it's big, we know that, we can't ignore it, we know that. How big it is, we don't really know. But now we're only talking about greenhouse gas emissions so far. Now we're going to talk about other problems, because we cannot just fix one problem at a time. We need to fix all of them now. And I've been talking way too long already, and it's been really good questions. Let me know if you're getting bored. And I'll speak faster.
Let's see that.
All right. Yeah. It's good that we're keeping up the good feelings here, even though we're looking at horrible things, because these are horrible problems, of course. Water is an important thing, right? We need to take care of water. Usually when we look at our planet, this is what it looks like. It's all blue. Lots of water there, right? Looks like we live on a water planet, and we do. But if we mathematically, of course, roll up all the water on the planet into a ball, then this is what it looks like. This is all the water that we have in relation to the size of the globe that we live on. And as you see, this is all the water. All the water in the oceans. But the water that we really care about, we need to care about all of it, of course. But the ones that's really important, that's for our survival, the one we use to drink, the one... could you get me some water, by the way? Oh, you're filming, okay. Stefan, please, can you help me get some water? Thank you. So the water that we really need in order to speak, in order to grow, in order to do everything, right, that we need is this fresh water. That's what we really care about. And the water that is easily accessible to us, that's not deep underground, that's the ones that is in lakes and rivers. You see that little button? You need to come closer? It's here, I promise, it's there. That's the small button right there. A small little ball there. So that's what we have. So this is a problem. We need to take care of the water. This is one campaign that they run in Australia to save 160 liters of water a day.
And then they don't even mention animal agriculture.
Of course they don't. No. Don't be so extreme. Right?
Fix the drip.
Exactly. If you do all of these things, you save 160 liters a day. Don't brush your teeth with the water running. Don't shower so long. So on, right? Fix the drip. 160 liters. We need to do these things. This is not false, it's not a lie, but it's again, focusing on the wrong thing. Focusing on the small thing. The yellow, that's what we're focusing on. This is Australia. That was an Australian thing. And as you see in Australia, 81% of the fresh water is used for for agriculture in general. Right? So this is, what are we doing with the water in agriculture? So about 70% of all fresh water is used for agriculture. And again, when we're talking about agriculture in general, about 70% of agriculture is animal agriculture. So about half of the fresh water on the planet that's being used today is used to produce meat. Yes?
So this is from 2017. And
Yeah.
it came from Australia. Do you know how old that was?
And I do not, no.
Because things are happening so fast now.
It's probably much worse there now because it's drying out. And they've had 50 degrees temperatures a lot, and of course the fires do not help either.
But do you think the awareness is slowly starting to change? Like,
I mean, they have an animal rights party in parliament since this happened. So yeah,
But
maybe.
this is at least 3 years old.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know.
It's okay, it's gonna get worse because of the slides.
Get ready.
Get ready.
So lack of water is a problem in the world. We see that there's a lot of areas where there's water scarcity or water stress. These are different things that we use to talk about. As you see, the areas where people are behaving badly to each other, right? Middle East, it's not just religion. Of course, religion can play a part, economy can play a part, but people tend to get cranky when they don't get water, when they don't get food, when it's too hot, right? There are 800 million, close to 800 million people in the world that do not have access to clean water on a daily basis. 800 million people. And of course, our farmers, our poor farmers are also having problems, right? Right? So the first ones complaining about the water, when we had a drought in 2018, they were the farmers. We have to slaughter our animals too fast. We're not ready, we won't make enough money on them, right? Because it's not just, the drinking water, it's the feed, it's everything. A few weeks ago there was an article in Swedish newspaper, big, horrendous thing. There's not enough bacon in Sweden. Again, right? What are we going to do? So, and this was from 2018. So the animal industry, of course, needs a lot of water. These are some easy to remember numbers. One single egg, 175 liters. So if the Australian campaign had done that instead, skip one egg. That would have been a rather easy campaign, right? Skip all the toothbrushing and all that, don't worry about that. Just skip one egg and you have the same effect. Thank you very much. 1 liter of cow's milk is 600 liters. This is Swedish numbers again. Yes, sorry.
I think if you made this into a t-shirt, it would sell very well.
Hopefully, yes. Very easy to do, indeed, yes.
What is the footprint?
This one, that's a good question, good. It's not carbon neutral, definitely. Cow milk, Swedish cow milk, about 600 liters. You've seen those really skinny Indian cows? They only need 450. But it's, so right? It's one of the driest countries in the world. India, they have huge problems with water, and they're wasting 450 liters of water to produce cow's milk, and they're drinking a lot of that in India. So I don't have a graph for that, but remember, 1 bathtub for an egg is very easy to remember. This is a swimming pool. 1 swimming pool for 1 kilo of cow's milk. I'll be happy to share this with you, Rebecca. You don't have to take pictures, but you can, of course, if you want. All right. So 1 swimming pool for 1 kilo of beef. And again, it's the feed. They drink about 100 liters of water a day. That's part of it, of course. And they live for a couple of years before they're slaughtered, the meat or the cows. But the big thing is the feed. And of course, in Sweden, the farmers, I was actually had a farmer in the audience a few days ago, and she screamed out, "But it's rainwater!"
Yes.
You have to say, "But it's rainwater, it's totally different." No, it's not totally different. It's the same water. It's the same little bubble we're talking about. If you're pumping it out of the ground, or if you're getting it thanks to that we have a lot of rain in Sweden, it's the same water. We have to use that water. And of course, the water that comes out of the cow is not clean afterwards, right? It's polluted. So it's that too, hormones, all kinds of things. Yes. Definitely, definitely. So this is another comparison graph about water usage. This one, you've all seen this one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's a 10-episode mini-series, actually it's a whole series, about the cheating in the almond business in California. Swedes eat about 1 to 2 kilos of almonds every year. We eat 90 kilos of this stuff, but it's the almonds, that's the problem, right? Of course not. And the water that comes out of the almond, down the almond tree, it's not too bad, right? Possibly the water that comes out of this, no, you don't want to drink that. Of course. So, very, very clear distinction here, right? signed up for the Mars One program a couple of years ago.
Right.
And I paid €30 to be on the list of migrants, one-way trip to Mars in 2030. Yeah. That sounds like an adventure. But no, they went bankrupt, sorry, so you'll have to stick with me. I'll be inviting myself again. All right. And so you'll stick with me, and you'll stick with another 10 to 11 billion people on the planet, right? And not all of them will be as nice as me. So, anyhow, so we're going to be 11 billion people on the planet, right? Right. We also know that we have about a planet that's covered by 71% water. So what we're talking about when we're talking about land use, it's 29%. That's what we have. So anytime we talk about sustainability, when we use that word, we're going to have to talk about, is that sustainable for 11 billion people? Right? Divided by 11 billion people. Say, a Tesla is sustainable. Is it really? If you multiply it by 11 billion people, no, a Tesla is not sustainable then. Of course not. You cannot have 11 billion Teslas running around. Welcome. Come in if you want. Hey. All right. So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about land, 29% and 11 billion people to use that land, right? We also need that land for absorbing carbon dioxide. Remember, the carbon dioxide was going straight up. The only way we have so far of getting that carbon dioxide back is planting trees. Even Trump knows this. He has a program for planting 1 trillion trees. En biljard blir det på svenska, tror jag. It's 15 zeros of trees. That's the only environmentally friendly thing he wants to do. But even he knows that planting trees is a good idea. But recently, they have discovered that it's actually not the trees. It's actually the fungi. The fiber inside. Those are the ones that are really storing carbon dioxide. So you've probably heard, you might have seen Gunde Svan talking about how good it is to cut down Swedish trees. Right? And that is correct if you're looking at the tree as one being. If you're looking at the forest as a system that connects and works through these fungi, then it's actually the fungi. And the fungi starts growing more and more the older the forest gets. So that's an important factor. So this whole idea of cutting down the forest every 45, 50 years, it's not carbon neutral. So we need these forests to keep growing. And what are we doing with the forest? Of course, we are cutting them down. We need lots of wild areas. We're growing more and more food on these. And when we're talking about growing food, it's not vegan food, it is feed. Feed for the animals. 70% more or less of the food we're growing on the planet is for animals. So let's look at this. This is our world in data again. 70% more or less. So of the land area, we're using 27% of the available land area to produce feed. Of the actual arable land, then it's actually 70%. Of the planet area, this is again from our world in data if you want to dig deeper into this. What we're using for planting food for humans, that is vegan food, that is only 7%. That's what we're using now. So this connection between cutting down the forest and producing meat is very, very clear. Right? And they're now cutting down 10 hectares of forest every year in the world. 10 million hectares, of course. So this is a huge problem, and it's not a problem that happened, in the 60s or so. This is something that happens now, especially since Bolsonaro was elected a few years ago. It's speeded up in Brazil, for example, but not only there. It's happening in many different places. Even in Sweden. Why aren't we cutting down the rainforest in Sweden? Well, we don't have any rainforest. Well, is that because rainforests do not grow in Sweden? Well, they have another name. They have called boreal forest, something like that. Anybody can pronounce it? No. You know what I'm talking about, right? Old for urskog is the word in Sweden. There we go. Urskog. We don't have any of that. We cut it down 5,000 to 7,000 years ago when we first came. We cut it down. Öland, where my mother lives, used to be covered by forest. Spain used to be covered by forest. We cut that all down. We don't have any left anymore. And now we're cutting down naturskog. Naturskog is a Swedish word that means forest that has not been touched for 150 years. We're cutting that down also. We don't have any jungles anymore. But the people that do have jungle, we like to say that we should save the rainforest, right? Even non-vegans say that we should save the rainforest. That's important, right? But when we look at that, why are they cutting down the rainforest? Well, for money, of course, because they're selling stuff from there. So they're cutting, of course, the timber. It's the blue arrows here. A lot of wood being cut down, of course, selling that. They're also producing beef directly. That's the dark blue one. And then we have palm oil and soybeans. Two of the largest producers of pigs in Europe, Denmark and Spain, they produce 30 and 50 million pigs every year. They do not grow any feed. Neither Denmark nor Spain produces feed in any significant amount. They import all of it. So 7,000 to 8,000 calories a day, that's what a growing pig eats. Multiplied by those 80 million that I just mentioned, that's a lot of soy. Because that's the main thing that they're giving these animals, so that they can grow really fast.
And they export to the US and Japan from Denmark.
Yes,
because
they do.
they don't have the certain smell in their pig meat.
Yes.
So it's a really dirty transportation of everything.
That's another, yes.
Nobody, I think people get it lucky to say this.
Of course.
It's so sad.
Yeah, definitely. And Denmark is exporting a lot to China also, and China is having a problem with their pigs now. It's another issue I'll be coming back to. But yes, it's horrible in so many ways. But now we're talking about land usage. And of course, we're importing a lot. This connection is also very, very clear, and it's happening all over the world. And of course, the reason they're burning the forest is that we're cutting them down, and they burn easier and so on. So we've all known for a long, long time that cutting down the rainforest has been a bad idea. This article just came out in November 2019. That's a few months ago. This says it's much worse. We thought it was bad. Now we know that it's 6 times worse than we thought before. So cutting down the rainforest is a really bad idea. We often see people talking about save the rainforest, right? When is the last time you saw somebody with a sign saying save the marshlands? Rädda träsken in Swedish. Doesn't sound as good, does it? Right? But that's actually more important. So if you see somebody save the marshlands, give them a hug. Definitely. Because they know what's going on. Save the bogs, that's a good one. That's very catchy, thank you. Right, the wetlands are actually disappearing faster than the forests. What are we doing with those? Well, we're dika ut dem. I don't know what that is. We're ditching them out. We're digging ditches so that the water runs out so that it's dry. And why are we doing that? Because you can't make any money from a marsh, from a wetland, right? But if you take the water out, so it's not wet anymore, then you can grow stuff there, and you can let your animals graze there. Of course, all the animals that used to live there, that like the wet, they don't get anywhere to live, so they die out. Also, of course, this marshland works as a sponge. When it rains a lot, it picks up all the water, and keeps it for a while, so that we don't get flooding. All those floods that we're seeing in southern Sweden right now, that we're seeing in England on a large scale, that they used to have marshes there. They don't anymore. They used to have wetlands. Okay, everybody.
There's a lot of people asking me about, it's so good to have grazing cattle in Sweden because det håller naturen öppen.
Ja, öppna landskap.
Öppna landskap.
Yes.
And this could be an argument, like trying to explain to them that maybe not that great.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like their argument for having öppna landskap is because they want the people to move to the countryside and kind of like keep the countryside pretty and open and romantic. But other than ecological standpoint, do you have another argument?
I have lots. Yeah, we're coming back to the öppna landskap a little bit later. But yes, but one of the things is, the easiest one to use, always, is yes, animals are good for the environment. Remember? Yeah. That's not a reason to kill them. Yeah, I mean, they're really good. Yes, if you want open landscape, yes, have lots of animals there. And you can also say another one that's good that most people react to. You know which the other group of people talking about open landscapes in the world? Anybody know? Bullfighters. Northern Spain. They say if we can't do bullfighting, then we won't have open landscape in northern Spain. Yes, it's true. They use that as an argument to defend bullfighting. So we need to torture these bulls, otherwise we can't have open landscapes. It's just as stupid, of course.
Because they want them to be able to graze or go out.
Yeah, of course, yes, yeah. Because they want to say that they had a good life all the way up until the way we've tortured them. Yes, okay. All right. Land usage. We're talking about land usage now, right? This is a comparison. And again, the animals that we actually let out a bit, like cows and sheep, they use a lot of land, of course. They eat a lot and they get to live. The ones that we press into a barn all their lives, they use less land, of course. But actually producing vegetables uses much less land. Fresh vegetables actually do use quite a bit of land. If you compare it to chicken, for example, it's yeah. If you want to save land, so yes. So I want to give the whole picture here. Yes, yes, of course. Vertical growing is a good idea, definitely. So there are solutions, but this is the average numbers right now. The way we grow fresh vegetables right now, it uses land. Yes, and we need to show the whole picture. We can't just say yeah. All right. Is this a good idea, dealing with our planet like this? Anybody want to prove, support?
They can't keep it off on the beach.
No, it's really, all right. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly. So let's move on to air. Yes, go ahead.
Can I ask about the previous question?
Yeah.
So, because I've been trying to find the numbers or something about the paper production in Brazil. I don't think it's gonna, but you didn't even have anything on this slide.
Paper.
I mean, because you can think that you cut down the woods to produce
Yeah.
paper. I don't think so. But
Yeah.
just to have.
Yes, it is in there. It was that. Pulp and paper is there,
But
but
there's
black
no
arrows
black.
there.
There's no black.
This is black.
Yeah, but no one.
Yeah.
For example, Brazil, which is the most hot topic.
Yeah, I don't think they. Well, I don't know. But the source to this graph is in the slides, so you can use it as a starting point for your further studies. That's a really good one, definitely. All right. Air pollution. Let's talk about air pollution. That's a fun thing, right? We know that this happens in lots of countries. So for example, Delhi, it kills 80 people a day, or 1 million. In all of India, it kills about 1 million people every year. This is a European problem also. 800,000 people die too early because of air problems. In the world, it's about 4.2 according to the WHO here. So, yeah, air pollution is a problem. And this is also WHO saying that more than 90% of the world's children breathe dirty air every day. I think we all can agree that that is a bad idea, right? We're against that. Children should not be breathing dirty air, right? All right. This happens in Sweden also. About 8,000, 7,600 are dying prematurely because of air pollution. One of the problems of air pollution is, of course, defecation. We have about 700 million people that do not have access to a toilet. That is, of course, a huge issue for women's security, for comfort, for spreading of disease, and of course for air pollution also. This is a huge problem in the world. And you see, yeah, it's in lots of places where people don't have access to a toilet. Bill Gates has realized that this is a problem, and he has spent several years of his life and several hundred million investing in a new toilet, and he's basically failed. He has a new toilet, but it costs $5,000 per toilet, so it's not, of course, sustainable. We cannot roll out that kind of, well, we should, but anyhow. But my main point here is that he has missed the animal battalion, the animal shit. Because, of course, if 700 million people's shit is a problem, then, of course, the 70 billion animals that we have in captivity pressed together That's what we're talking about, right? Close together. Animals shitting in the woods is not a problem. Animals shitting close together in a barn is a problem. Farmers often want to say that this is a resource that we can use and we need that, otherwise we'll all starve. So on. I'll get back to that one later. Anyhow, but of course this is a problem. It creates a lot of problems. Good number to remember when I'm talking about pig's meat is 1 kilo of pig's meat produces 15 kilos of pig's shit. So let's have that rule. If somebody buys a kilo of pig's meat, they also have to take care of the 15 kilos. Here's your kilo of beef, here's your 15 kilos of beef, right? That's the rule, right? Yeah. You have a problem with that, sir? It would look differently then, right? All right. Transports. This is not, I've seen transports like this live in Indonesia. That's how they transport there, right? And this is not how it looks in Sweden, of course, but it smells just the same. Now we're talking about transports. Now we're talking about air pollution. Go to a slaughterhouse and just breathe, and then cough, right? And then die, yeah. Because it's going to smell horrible. Go to a hen house or a chicken barn where they press in 40,000 chickens in a barn and breathe and cough, right? Because this, they all take a pee, of course. Produces lots and lots of ammonia. And of course they also use ammonia to try to keep it sterile, so there's a lot of ammonia pollution. Of course, also another air pollution problem is fires. The fires that we're seeing, for example, in Australia now, creates a lot of air pollution, clearly. This is the number of sheep that they have in Australia. Most of Australia looks like this. It's hot and dry. It's not a good place to have too much hair, right? Because they've been bred to have too much hair. And also, of course, they use a lot of water. So we're seeing the result. And also, of course, they're eating everything they can. So overgrazing is a real problem in Australia. We're seeing the result very, very clearly. It's all connected, of course, right? All right, moving on to volcanoes. They cause a lot of air pollution also, of course, when all that ash goes up into the air. And if we just stop eating chickens, then the volcanoes would stop, right? I'm just checking that you're awake and you're not. Good, you're all awake. I've been talking for an hour and 10 minutes now. All the other things, right? All the other things that we've been talking about, we can influence those. We can change those by simply what we choose to eat. The volcanoes we cannot change. All the other things we can change, and we should, of course, right? All right, moving on to another thing we can change. This is World Life Federation. They come out with a report every year called the Living Planet Index. It says how many animals are living on this planet. They're trying to count that. Very admirable job, very difficult job, of course, but the trend is very, very clear. We all remember that in 1970, everything was perfect on the planet, right? That was when I was born, right? So after that, it's gone downhill. I'm sorry. But
Why were you born?
19, yes, it's all my fault. Yeah. No, but this is really horrible. Of course, it's going down really, really quick. And if we compare this, I mean, we call this the 6th mass extinction. The last one, the previous one, the 5th mass extinction, the dinosaurs. When we see that in the movies, we see the meteors and the asteroids coming down, crashing into the Earth, and then all the dinosaurs die. That whole dying out, an extinction event, is defined as 75% of the planet, of the life on the planet dies out. So now we're at 60 in 50 years. Anybody remember how long it took? It actually took 10,000 years. The last time. Now we've been doing 60% in 50 years. So it's really, really fast. Here are some animals that you've probably heard of. Big cats. The trend is very, very clear, of course. Here are our closest neighbors. And remember, all of these guys are vegetarians. They do not hunt, they do not milk, and so on. Some of them get rather butch anyway, right? They get all the protein they need. And so this trend is very, very clear. From the 1970s, well, it went on before then also, of course. But since 1970, they've chosen to count and it's going down really rapidly. And of course, from an environmental perspective, the word that we're talking about all the time here is biodiversity. That's what we're losing. We're losing biodiversity. In some areas, it's even worse. For example, in the marshlands. Remember, we lost them very, very quickly. Here's one example. In Australia East, they've been dying out by 90% in 37 years. Right? And the main reason for animals dying out in nature is, of course, that they don't have anywhere to live. Fancy word for that is habitat. They don't have a place to live. They won't have any more babies. They won't thrive, of course. This is a graph showing why some species are dying out. And as you see, loss or destruction of habitat. That's the big gray one there. That's a big chunk. That's why, of course, pollution and all the other things are happening also, but that's a big chunk of it. Another chunk is water, lack of water. Of course, when we're drying out the land, all the wild animals, they don't get enough water either. We remember in the news recently in Sydney, 1 billion animals have died because of the fires. Part of that is, of course, dehydration. Hunting is, of course, another huge problem. In Sweden, we kill about 1 million animals every year in hunting. That's one of the biggest threats, of course. We know that the first things that hunters kill off is, of course, the predators. We're seeing that in Sweden also. They're, for example, killing this one, which is, of course, threatened, the yarn. In Sweden, it's actually, they have a shooting alley under Parliament for the politicians. Yes, there's a hunting club in Parliament. I don't know how many members are in it now. It's not official, but
It's bigger than that.
what?
It's bigger than that.
I didn't find it booted.
I have seven.
Seven ranges. Okay. Do you have a picture of that?
No.
Oh, okay. If you find one, please let me, because that's.
I can ask Rebecca too.
Yes, please do. That would be really nice. Yes, because but that's the main point, right? This is corridors of power, definitely, by definition. And now they're even going to start allowing hunting of squirrels. And we often hear that hunting, even World Wildlife Federation and Naturskyddsföreningen, both of them are saying that hunting is carbon neutral. It's green lighted by World Wildlife Federation. Hunting, right? So, what is the problem with hunting? Well, part of the problem is that it's hard to count. How much are the emissions of transporting the animal in and out of the forest? How much is the environmental problem of the lead poisoning that's coming out of all the bullets being shot? It's hard to measure that. So they count it at 0 because it's hard to measure. That's actually what it says in the World Wildlife Federation. I checked it this morning. Go ahead.
But that's so wrong because there are so many eagles and hawks and other predators in the air that die because of lead poisoning.
I don't know what you're talking about. Of course it's so wrong. Yes, definitely. All the way, all the way. Yes, it's horrible, definitely. And another part of the problem, and this one is easy to explain to hunters. I often get into argument with hunters. And they talk about the circle of life. Right? That's a real thing. Circle of life is a real thing. But when we humans kill an animal and take it out of the forest, we take away the food for all the other ones out there. There is a lack of carrion in the forests. Because all of these bacteria, insects, small animals, carrion eaters, they have to eat carrion. They have to eat dead animals. They do not have the option. They are carrion eaters. Humans are not. Oh, Satan. Yes. Exactly. Yes. Yes. Definitely. There's a lot of things. Yeah. A lot of things going on there. And of course, that is all lost when we carry it out. If a human ran up to the animal, bit it to death, and then ate it raw, and then take a shit in the forest and left the carcass there, then it would be carbon neutral, maybe. If maybe 1 million of us did that. If 11 billion of us did that, it would be crowded in the forest. Right? That would not be a good situation, right? And here's another picture that's really, really scary. This is the biomass. This is the kilos or tons of animals in nature, on the planet. 96% is humans or captive animals. The The wild ones are just 4%. A few thousand years ago, this was reversed. It was the other way around. Humans were very few, and there were lots of wild animals. Now, this is, yeah, go ahead.
We were 1%.
10,000 years ago, that's a good number to remember.
We were 1%.
We were 1%, yeah, and we all hardly had any captive
The
animals.
rest was wild.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good number to remember. Yes, good, thank you. Good idea, of course, not good idea, yeah, we agree. That's a very sane reaction right there. All right, can we move on from wild animals? How about fish then? Well, when I was a kid, my parents, we want to start with this because this is a very common misconception. My parents told me that it's okay to put the morakniv in the head of this fish because it doesn't feel anything. It doesn't scream, right? Of course, it does feel pain. It has the same kind of nervous system that we do, and it has the same kind of brain that we do. Pain is a fundamental thing in all animals. They can feel pain, it's without a doubt. There's no scientists that claim that fish do not feel pain now, of course. But moving on to the environmental issues regarding fish. When we fish, globally in general, we try to fish one fish. We fish tonfisk, for example. Or we fish, what do we fish in the Östersjön? Torsk, right, what's that? Cod, of course. We try to fish cod in the Baltic Sea, right? We miss by 40% on average. It's called bycatch. We catch something else. What we do with that is usually we grind it up and we give it to other animals. We'll get back to that. Minks, for example, chickens, and also pigs, of course. 50% again is another number, easy to remember. We've lost about 50% of the life in the ocean since 1970 again. World Wildlife Federation. The same thing happens there. 90% is also a good number to remember. That is the number that we've lost of the big fish in the ocean. So the sharks, the dolphins, the whales, the tuna, of course. 90% on average of the big fish since 1970. Again. Also, 90% is a good number to remember because that's the bycatch on shrimp. So when you're fishing shrimp, you have to have very fine nets. And you get 90% bycatch on that. And you know how shrimp is marketed in Sweden, right? It's always marketed as... Oh, that too, yes, that's another lie. All right, but I was thinking, well, that's a good one, yes. It's horrible. But it's marketed as handskalade.
In Africa.
Yeah, exactly. It's peeled by hand, right? That's how you market shrimp all the time in Sweden. And how many people in Sweden work with peeling shrimp? Nobody, of course. Anybody want to do that when they grow up? Of course not. They do it in Africa and they do it in China. Horrible thing. All of this is being sold, of course. They're making money from that also by giving it to chickens and pigs, of course. Plastic is another thing. Save the oceans. Stop using straws. We've heard that campaign, all of us, right? And we should, of course, save the oceans by not eating the inhabitants of the oceans. Plastic is a huge thing. This industry, if you've ever done fishing, you've probably got the nets caught, or the reel, you got it caught, right? Maybe you were good enough to swim down and take it away, so that it didn't stay there, because you know plastic takes many, many tens of thousands of years to decompose. So you probably dove down and cut it loose, right? Do you think the fishing industry does that? Of course it does not. It uses miles and miles of fishing nets. If you Google or go to YouTube and look for ghost nets, you'll find lots of horror stories about huge nets that are just left in the ocean, and of course they keep killing.
I heard 70% of the plastic in the ocean is from the fishing industry, but how can you measure that?
It varies a lot. I've seen a lot of different numbers.
Yeah.
The one I usually refer to is the one of National Geographic. They did a study, it's published in National Geographic, the article. It says that 50% of the plastic in the Pacific plastic patch is fishing gear.
Okay.
47.
47, yes, that's the number, exactly, good. So that article is linked in my slide here also.
Yeah.
But how much is from fishing gear is, I would not use the number 70%. But that it's a lot is definitely, no doubt about it. And of course, save the oceans, don't eat the inhabitants. Don't eat the fish, that makes very much sense, of course. And of course, this whole industry uses a lot of resources, and it's a horrible job also. There's every day almost there's new revelations of how they're misusing. There was one in Expressen today about slavery work in Thai ships that are selling stuff in Sweden also. Also, these agreements and these stamps that they do, and that Queen Victoria, for example, no, Princess Victoria, is marketing, we should only buy, what was it?
MSC.
Yeah, something like that, yes.
MSC, yes.
MSC, yeah. Certified fish, right? She markets that all the time. These agreements are signed almost every month. There's a new agreement. Now we're going to fish according to the rules. And of course they break those agreements, and nobody ever gets punished for breaking those rules, almost. And of course the fish is also dying out because of climate change. Because the temperature change that we're seeing on the surface is also happening below the surface. Of course, it's the same thing. It's the same system, of course, right? So when the temperature changes in the water, fish are cold-blooded. They are reliant on a specific temperature. That's why they are where they are. They don't move. I mean, some of them migrate, of course, but they migrate because they expect the right temperature. So when they don't get that temperature, they don't lay eggs. They don't, continue living, for example, or the bottom line. And that happens even to cute fish like Nemo there. All right. Speaking of other cute fishes, this is dolphins. You've probably seen this one. This is from Faroe Islands. This is pilot whales, the only organization that actively fights for those animals is Sea Shepherd. And if we go to Faroe Islands and wear one of these jackets with Sea Shepherd on it, we will get arrested because it's illegal to wear one of those jackets on Faroe Islands. Even though whale fishing has been outlawed in all of the world since 1987. I cut out the worst part there. Any questions on fish? That's a good reaction right there. You're right with me. Yes, I feel the same. All right, that's all I have to say on the environment. I've been talking way too long. I apologize for that.
No.
Thank you for your patience. All right, so I'm going to talk about two more things. I'm going to talk about health, and also I'm going to talk a bit about the difference between our Swedish farming and the rest of the world. Now I've been talking about global things. I mentioned Swedish a little bit, but I'm going to talk a bit about the differences there also. So if you have patience for that, yeah. You want to take a 5-minute break, or
No.
you good? Everybody's good? Go. All right. Let's talk about antibiotics then. Antibiotics is another resource that we need to save. Of course, antibiotics has literally saved the lives of hundreds of millions, or possibly even billions of people on the planet. Right? It's a good thing. Antibiotics is good. But we're wasting that resource, that fantastic invention, we're wasting it by giving it to animals. We're not giving it because they have a cold and we want to be nice to them. We're giving it because they get sick when they're pressed into a barn. Right? Of course they do. And because we want them to grow faster. Right? So 80% is the global number. So let's get into the Swedish numbers then. As you probably have heard, the Swedish farmers are always bragging about how little antibiotics they use. Right? They are using 11, here's the number right there, 11 tons of active substance every year in Sweden. 11 tons. How much, if you get a penicillin pill, what's the active substance in there? What's it measured in? Anybody know? Milligrams. Absolutely right. So this is tons. They're measuring it in tons of active substance. So this is nothing to be proud of. They're wasting 11 tons of active substance. And we're not even the best. Or we're not even the least bad. That's the word we should be using, remember? Least bad. Both Norway and Iceland are using less than us. So if we want to eat animals that have less, then we should buy Norwegian, right? Of course, we shouldn't buy any animal products at all. And also something that we should know of is that something that we are doing differently in Sweden as to other countries is that we're using, I don't know the word in English, small spectrum, narrow range or something like that. narrow range antibiotics, broad spectrum antibiotics, I think that's what they're called. So in other countries, they often use this. This is to make them grow. This was outlawed in 1980 in Sweden, so it grew, it disappeared rather quickly. So that they give it in the feed so that they grow quicker. And often they use broad spectrum antibiotics. In Sweden, we do not do for making them grow. We only give it when they're sick. Of course, they do get sick quite a lot, but we don't do that anymore. And we also do not use broad spectrum. That is the claim from the industry. Of course, there's a lot of cheating in this industry also. We know that. But this is the official number, so when you're arguing about what is different in Sweden, this is what you should know. That we're not the best, we still use 11 tons.
We are not the least bad.
What?
We are not the least bad.
We're not the least bad, exactly, yes. Exactly, and that's nothing to brag on.
And I don't honestly think when we brag about using the narrow spectrum, we don't always have a diagnosis. We don't always know which bacteria is causing whatever is going on. It's very sort of estimated, that whole thing.
You're absolutely right, yes.
And the farmers are allowed to treat the animals themselves, like they just need a prescription and then they can just treat it.
Excellent.
So they go bananas a little bit.
Yeah, they try that. I mean,
They do their own, so it sounds very nice, but it's not really.
yeah, we're doing.
Yeah.
I was talking to
No, but narrow spectrum sounds really nice, but then you need to know
what you're doing.
But if you're shooting blinds or whatever it is, so you need to do diagnostics, but there's no money in doing diagnostics.
That's exactly correct. The only two treatments that are really done in farm animals, it's antibiotics and slaughter. And that's what they're doing.
Yeah,
I was talking.
calcium to
Yeah.
a dairy cow.
Yeah.
If the dairy cow is laying down with the calcium, they could stand up to do it or
I was talking to the owner of Dyrenes Frie Farm in Denmark. It's a sanctuary, and they have a lot of pigs there. Like I think they have 20 pigs or something. And the problem that they're having is that they can't get a veterinarian to help them, because these animals, of course, are bred to grow really, really fast. So they had one pig recently that was 500 kilos. It was huge, and of course it was suffering because they had bone problems and everything. And they could not get a veterinarian to treat it in any way, because the veterinarians, they're not trained to do that. They're not trained to actually treat the animals. They have those.
they are trained on herd management, not individual management.
That's a good way to put
And
it.
if you adopt a egg laying hen,
Yeah.
because you want to rescue it, she's bred to lay one egg every day, so she will actually just destroy her own body to
Yeah.
lay egg. So now some veterinarians can put a hormonal chip into that hen, so she stops to lay egg, so she can actually live a life. But this is quite new, because we usually, or like in the past, we wouldn't keep those chickens.
No.
And actually, a lot of veterinarians are having a huge problem when they actually try to go to those sanctuaries and help those animals. They are being so criticized by the industry, so they can't work with the farmers. So they have to do, so if you work in a practice, you are not allowed to go to the animal sanctuaries and treat those animals. You can only work in herd management.
Yeah.
It's really, really terrible.
Yeah.
It's very violent. And
course.
there's a lot of threats.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, and scary.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me tell you this, but I
Yeah.
don't think people know this.
Thank you for sharing. No, I hadn't heard those either. All right. Moving on. The problem for us humans when it comes to antibiotics is, of course, that there are lots of antibiotic-resistant bacteria out there. 1 in every 3 chickens and pigs that are sold in the European Union, including Sweden, has antibiotic-resistant bacteria in them. Of course, the industry claims that this is not transmitted between between the flesh and the human. But we still get 25,000 deaths every year in the European Union because of this. And it's also important to remember that there hasn't been any new antibiotics invented in the world since 1987. So it's all the same antibiotics that we're using. So what the health experts are worried about is that we'll go back to Middle Ages, when it was really, really dangerous to get an operation. Now, of course, when we get an operation, we always get an antibiotics session after that, right? That's standard, because you don't want to get an inflammation. And if you can't do that anymore, then any operation will be dangerous. So that's antibiotics. And so it's a very, very clear connection to the animal industry, of course. We're wasting all that antibiotics. As cancer, very clear connection here also. WHO has said it's this on the same evidence level as asbestos and tobacco.
Or processed meat.
Processed meat, yes.
Yeah, not just meat.
Not just meat, no, it's processed meat. You're absolutely right. So that doesn't mean, of course, that when you smoke, you get cancer directly, but you increase your risk, and it's the same thing. It increases the risk. And also, it's very clear that all the foods that is recommended to prevent cancer, of course, prevention is always better than a cure, they're all plant-based products. Let's move on to AIDS, Ebola, and other pandemics. AIDS is, of course, a horrible thing in many, many ways. It came from apes. Apes have had AIDS-like viruses for millennia. The transmission came by people in Africa eating ape meat. That was how the first transmission from ape to human was. But just let them alone and not eat them, then that would not have happened. Probably, of course. We also know SARS, of course, that was quite a few years ago now, 2016, but it started in chicken factories and hen factories in China. Killed like 600 people, I think, and infected, what?
724.
Excellent, great. Well, not excellent, of course. Sorry, thank you for sharing that information. That's what I wanted to say. We also know pig pest. Pig pest is a huge problem right now in China. They not only have the coronavirus, they have this thing also going on. It's been going on for quite a while, and they're trying to contain that. And the way to contain it,
I don't want to hear.
it's not good. Let's put it that way.
So bad.
Yeah, it's really bad. You isolate them and you kill them, of course. That's what you do. That's the only thing you can do. They do not treat this at all. Then we have mad cow disease. Yes, of course. They isolate the whole population and kill all of them. So they've literally killed hundreds of millions of pigs before they were about to be slaughtered anyway, of course. But yes, before this. Mad cow disease, of course, same thing. Animal industry, they were giving cows actual meats, bone marrow and stuff, to eat. So that's, of course, connected there also. The pig influenza, that's what it was called first, and then it was renamed to H1N1. And that, of course, started in the pig farms in Mexico. And now, of course, we have the coronavirus, which is the most current one and still ongoing, as we know. And that started in something called a wet market. A wet market is where you go to point at a living animal and get it fried, living wild animal often. So in Indonesia they have this also, it's called an extreme market, where they eat all kinds of different things. So if you want to try something new and exciting, like for example a baby rat, then and get that fried right in front of you, you think that's a kick, then you can do that. All right. So the connection here to a lot of pandemics is very clear also, of course. That's what I had to say about health, or rather disease. Moving on to Swedish farming then. We've mentioned a few parts of that. Of course, this whole thing about we are the best ones, it's not true. There's every country in the world is claiming that we're the best. When I do activism and street outreach and stuff in Spain or in Germany or wherever I go in in Denmark, for example, I always say, you always buy Swedish meat, right? And of course, they're laughing at me because nobody's buying Swedish meat there. They don't think it's best. They're buying Spanish meat, or they're buying Danish meat or whatever, because they think that's the best. They have the best animal care in the world, of course. There are no international studies saying that Swedish animal welfare is the best. Quite the contrary, those studies that exist This example, this organization, for example, is saying that we're in the second level. We're in the same one as Denmark and Chile and Netherlands and so on. We're not in the A range, we're in the B range. Of course, this is a very common thing that we say also that they have a good life, but of course, we're eating babies all along. So let's move on to pigs. In Sweden, we kill about 2.5 million of those, of course. When we're talking about Swedish farming, the first thing they always talk about is the cows. It's always the cows, right? Because they actually get to go outside sometimes, some of them, right? But let's move the discussion over to the pigs, because they are almost always indefensible. There's no argument for the pigs at all. They're almost never outdoors. Of course, they don't graze. They're given feed, almost entirely feed. They don't help with the open environment and all of that. 98% of Swedish pig's meat is not produced ecologically or marked with cross. And this whole, they're using so much space. In Denmark, we're often talking about the Danish pigs are pressed in. Vincenzi and I have been to some schools where we've done this, we've put a square on the floor to just show the difference between how much space a Danish pig needs and a Swedish one. Basically, it's a square like this, and then the difference is this. Okay. A little bar. And that's how much space they have their entire life, up to 100 kilos. One difference that is different in Sweden is that we do not cut off their tails. That has been forbidden in Sweden. And also, claim from the industry is that MSRA does not exist in Sweden. I doubt it very much also, but that is the claim, and I haven't seen any proof that it does exist in Sweden. But of course, these animals are traveling across borders all the time, so I see no logical reason that it shouldn't exist, but I have not seen evidence of it. So maybe we shouldn't talk about MSRA in Sweden yet. But of course, the risk is there, it's the same industry, of course. And so and of course, the main land animal that's suffering a lot in Sweden are the hens and the chickens. We're killing about 100 million of those every year. On Öland, they kill 100,000 a day in Mörbylånga, in the slaughterhouse there. They also use about 25% of the water of the whole city. 25% of water goes to that specific slaughterhouse. So of course we should be talking about these numbers. And of course we have the cows also.
Can I ask you a question
Sure.
about the chicken? So when you and Smith reported aid or whatever about the broken wings, and it never came anywhere,
No.
what's their argument like? It's okay if more than half have broken wings. How did the industry get away with it?
Well, the response, that's a good, marketing. They're really good at marketing. And what they do is, well, oh yes, we're going to deal with this. We take this very seriously. Animal welfare is our primary. We have the best and the hardest rules in Sweden. Really? Don't you trust me? They're really good at that. They are so sincere. They look straight into the camera. They're media trained. They're good at that. What do you mean doing something? They don't need to do that. Much cheaper to do media training than to actually do something. And if you're going to kill 100,000 chickens a day, you can't do that in a humane way. It doesn't exist.
But you left them try to sue them, or what did they do? They did a police.
Yeah, I think so. So that's the way it is. Cows, of course, we kill about 1.5 million every year of that. There are about 1.5 million living cows in Sweden on average. We kill about 500,000 every year. 350,000 of those are milking cows. The official numbers, of course, farmers are always claiming that whole soy bit does not apply to Swedish cows. They're always out grazing. but of course they're not. We know that. Yes. But that's what they're claiming, right? But according to their official numbers, about 2% of the feed is soy, specifically to Swedish cows. This is the official number, of course. I mean, there's a lot of things that they're given, but soy specifically is 2% of the feed to Swedish cows on average.
Does that include both slaughter cows and milk cows?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, 2% of all the feeds to 1.5 million cows, that's a lot of soy.
That's a lot of soy. Yeah.
Definitely. And only 16% of the meat in Sweden is ecological.
So, what does ecological really mean?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Because, you know, like, people are so deceived by this term.
Mhm. I don't really have a good answer for that. I mean, it means that you can, it has rules for what you can feed the cows.
Exactly.
That-
So
that's-
it's about what you will feed them.
Yes, it's not anything else. There's no
Yeah,
animal
so-
welfare or
There is
anything
one
else.
more thing. So you can't treat the animal too close to slaughter. So you need to have
Yeah.
at least 42 days before you treat the animal when it goes to the slaughterhouse.
Right.
And that actually affects the treatment. Because if it's, oh, this cow is going to get slaughtered in 43 days, I'm not going to treat this cow. And if it breaks the leg or whatever on the transportation, it doesn't matter because if I get deported, the charges are good. So organic is not always good because it doesn't always protect the individuals that are sick.
Yeah. And of course, there's no ecological transports, there's no ecological slaughterhouse,
Yeah.
and so on and so on. Minks, of course, is one of our big things that we should be talking about when we're talking about Swedish farming, because minks, there's not that many countries where we have fur farming at all. But Sweden is one of those countries that actually allow that. And these, of course, are predators, mandatory predators, so they do eat a lot of meat. So that's also, this whole business keeps the slaughter industry running because they get to sell all their stuff, all their leftovers. So this is connected to, that makes the meat that humans eat cheaper because we have the mink industry. Because the slaughterhouses make money from this also. And same thing with the fishing industry, of course, they get somewhere to sell all that.
And the mink chicks that get raised.
Exactly, that's
goes
another
to
thing.
the meat.
That's correct, that's correct. So mink is really something that we should bring the conversation to talk more about those, definitely. And of course, these animals are kept inside all of their lives, and they are water creatures, they like to swim, and according to the rules, very clearly specified rules of the Swedish djurskyddslagen, is that they are allowed to get to do what they're naturally supposed to do. And of course, swimming is one of those things that they do not get to do. And the claim from the industry, which is correct, of course, is that if they got to have swimming pools or whatever in there, then it wouldn't be sustainable, economically sustainable, right? So that's one way of closing down this industry, pushing for them to have somewhere to swim. Then the industry dies out automatically. And of course, finally, öppna landskap, open landscapes. We mentioned those. And the main argument that I use for öppna landskap, well, there's a lot of them, of course. But first, acknowledge that yes, animals are good for the environment. Because you cannot argue that the animals are bad. The animal industry is bad, but the animals are good. Especially grazing animals, they do a lot of benefits. I had an argument in Gothenburg a few days ago, and there's a farmer there. She was given as much time as me, and she had one slide, and she was talking about all the benefits that grazing animals do for the environment. And yes, I didn't argue the point at all. Because yes, grazing animals are good for the environment. But that's not a reason to kill them. That's the main thing there. And of course, we need to think about other animals. They do not contribute. I eat Swedish meat because I like open landscapes. Right? That's what we hear. Right. How do the chicken help with the open landscapes? They do not. How do the hens do? How do the minks do? All of that. And of course, we are all for animals. We vegans like animals, right? We Animal Rebellion, we want more animals. Wild ones. And of course, in the world, we need need to take this internationally also when we're talking about compare. In the big world, outside of Sweden, nobody is talking about the open landscapes. There's feedlots, that's what they're talking about, yes. Yeah. But they're also talking about that the Swedish Ängsmarker, grasslands, they are threatened, but there's not a single international study with listed areas that are threatened in the world. They're talking about the coral reefs, they're talking about rainforests, exactly. Those are the areas that are really threatened. Swedish farmlands are not threatened. There's no international study there. Most of the world is fighting for more trees, not more open landscapes. In the world, we're seeing desertification. We're seeing overgrazing. Those are the real problems. When we're talking about Swedish farming in general, we should keep in mind that 80%, 81% in fact, is feed. That's what we're growing. These open landscapes, and when we look at this, it looks rather nice, right? It looks green. Well, there's no cows there, yes, of course. But this is how most open landscapes actually look. There's one, this is a monoculture, right? Nothing could really live here. Vincentia and I have driven from Spain, and this is how most of Europe looks. It's monocultures. There's one feed everywhere. And of course, you can't even imagine any biodiversity here. Maybe there are some types of insects that are especially like this, but of course, what biodiversity means that there's diversity there, right? There's lots of different kinds of animals. Of course, this is all just one. So monoculture is one. 45% of that is called val. All right. Another argument that we often hear is it doesn't grow here, right? We can't grow anything else than grass on my land. You hear that all the time, right? This is Kiruna. This is the kolonilotförening. I don't know what that is in Swedish, but you know what kolonilot is? It's a little area where you get one of these little plots of land, and you're allotted that from the city, and you get to grow whatever you want there. And it's very popular, and this is how it looks in Kiruna. That's way up north, right? That's in Kiruna. That's in Kiruna. And you see, it's all green. There's lots of things growing here. And we are already, they also often say that we will starve if we don't eat animals, right? Right? We already produce today 5,000 calories of humanly edible calories every day, vegetables of course. Most of those are of course given to animals. We know that the two largest producers of vegetables and fruits are Spain and Holland. Holland is a really good example. They don't have that much different nature than we do. It's almost the same, right? And the weather is almost the same, the earth is about the same, the molecule is about the same. So whatever they can do in Holland, we can do that here also, of course. And they're exporting all over the place. Most of our vegetables come from Holland today. And Spain, of course, yes. We can do the same thing, even up there in Kiruna.
Do you think that we can grow things like tomatoes or stuff like that?
I know that we can.
Tomatoes,
Definitely we can. Definitely can. There's this article that I really like about a family that has built a greenhouse around their entire house. They had a house and they built a greenhouse outside, and they're doing everything there. Right? I think they have grapes. I think they have. Yeah.
So self-sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. My mother has a lot behind her house. She has about 100 square meters or something, and she has I think about 60 different things growing there that she can eat now. Tomatoes is really easy.
Where does your mother live?
On Öland. So she has a watering problem there also, but still. And when she moved there, she bought the lawn. It was just grass, almost dead grass. Now she has 50, 60 things growing there, and it's really lively in just a few years of work. And of course, the manure. this is good. Manure is good in a certain level, right? A little bit of manure spread out is good, yes. And it can come from animals or it can come from chemicals. But well, the problem is that we have way too much. We're producing about 300 tons every day just from the chickens in Sweden. So of course, we don't need that much. Too much manure is a huge problem in the world. So that's the easiest solution. And also, there's more and more vegan growing. There's vegan certified growing where you do compost and all kinds of interesting things. So we do not need to kill animals to get their shit. It kind of, yeah, they shit much better when they're alive, right? Simple as that, really. So, I've given you lots and lots of bad news. Almost 2 hours of bad news. Are you ready for some good news?
Yes.
Yes, all right. Well, the first thing is that we are not vampires.
Oh, shit.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
We do not need blood to survive. We will not die if we don't get animal products. We will not burst into flames and die, right? So we can get all the things that we need from plants. We can get zinc, we can get vitamin D, we can get B12 from pills and from lots of other things also.
From plants.
And from plants also.
There is a plant called, I don't know what, buckwheat or something.
Buckwheat, sounds good.
That,
Yes.
that has bioavailable B12.
Very good.
And a lot of the production animals get B12 injection all the time.
Yeah.
That's correct. So we don't need to get that from animal fiber, of course. We can only get that from vegetables. We cannot get that from animal products. Iron, of course, there are lots of things. And omega-3, of course, very easy to get also. And protein, you can actually get that from plants also. That's good news, right? Whew! Good news. All right. There's protein in everything. Right. All right. Another piece of good news is that you don't have to eat just cucumber. Remember this one? This was a couple of years ago now. A doctor that published an article saying that it's crazy to go vegan because you have to eat 18 kilos of cucumber. And he got this published in Dagens Nyheter, the largest newspaper in Sweden. Yes, it's crazy. And of course, he's right. If you just eat cucumber, then you have to eat 18 kilos of cucumber. So yes, don't eat just cucumber, okay? Right, remember from this lecture, it's producing more waste, it's polluting more, don't shoot the cows, don't eat just cucumber, okay? That's everybody has those things? Good, thank you. Great. Vegan food can of course look like this. It's very colorful, very, very good, very tasty and all of that. And more good news. You can be very, very strong, you can be successful in sports and so on, and still be vegan.
Win the Grammy.
You can win the Grammy, even that, yes, definitely. If you want to know more about this, I think most people already know more about this than I do, but anyhow, there's lots of documentaries. In here I have a list of actually 37 vegan documentaries, and there are lots of those that are explaining this very well. Of course, this one is about the environment mostly, this is about the ethics, this is about the sports and all that, and health are those two. Game Changers is the most recent one, very, very popular. But of course, everything is online also. So you can find everything that you need there. Let's see. Actually, I have a few more slides that I haven't moved into the right position that are about Swedish. Yeah. Okay, can I go on? A few more right now.
Yeah.
That was the end. Sorry, but yeah, I forgot a few slides here. Sorry.
The end is just the beginning.
Yeah. Sorry about that. All right. Another thing that's different between, I missed that when I was on the Swedish department here, sorry. There's one different with water. Remember the farmer that yelled, "It's rainwater," all that. That is true. We do not do irrigation much in Sweden. That's one difference between us and the rest of the world. And the world in the total, it's about 70% of all farming that is irrigated. That is, you pump up water. You can call that fossil water. That is a word you're using. But of course it's the same water we're talking about. It's the same groundwater. But that is what animal farmers often use. That it's the difference between fossil water and rainwater. course, it's the same planets, it's the same water, it's the same water system that we're talking about. But in that is a difference that we should be aware of. In Sweden, that number is about 97% of our farming is done not irrigated. Only 3% is irrigated in Sweden. All right, another specific Swedish thing that I forgot before is the reindeer. We kill about 260,000 reindeer every year. These animals are, of course, suffering in a lot of ways also. They are also, of course, getting transported. They are, I mean, when you see them in the pictures, they're roaming free, right? But most of them are actually reared in captures. So they are not roaming free. The Sami villages actually are in control of a third of the Swedish land surface. They actually own it, and they have now been given also the right to control hunting in those areas. That just happened a few months ago. So a third of the Swedish land is given to a few families that own this and are allowed to decide over life and death of not only these 260,000 animals, of course, but also all the living things on a third of our country, which is still a rather large country. And of course, there's a lot of issues here, and when we're talking about the Sami cultures, it's very easy to get accused of racism, of course, or something like that, that we're mistreating them. And there's no doubt that the Sami culture, and the Sami people have been badly treated by the Swedish government for hundreds of years, or even many hundreds of years. But this is not something that's defensible. This is not part of our culture. This is not part. I mean, it is part of their culture, just in the same way that bullfighting is a part of the Spanish culture. That doesn't mean, if your culture means that you're using somebody, it cannot be defended. And also, we need that land. We're talking about land usage. We need to share the land for all 11 billion people. That a third of the land is used for a few families. That's what we're talking about. That is not sustainable. They do not have the right to that land. Just as, I mean, most of the land was the animals first, right? Belonged to nature, and we need to share that. And everybody needs to share that. Of course, the Sami people will be victims again when we rewild that area, which is what we need to do. And we will try to make it as good for everybody as possible, of course. But we cannot sacrifice the future of the planet because of traditions. Because we all have these bad traditions. We Swedish people have our Euroquinka and everything else. That's part of our culture. That's not defensible either.
We should also know that the area they have now have nothing to do with Sweden, it came from Canada. Because it killed off all the wild forest deers and wild meadow deers. They still have an ancient aging.
Interesting.
So
they're not native there or anything.
No, they imported deers from Canada.
And also, these are rather bad jobs. And the average salary for a Sami reindeer manager is about 30 Swedish crowns an hour. So these are not good jobs that are worth protecting for their sustainability. So this is a big issue that we also need to take a firm stance on. And I'm very disappointed with Greta that actually went up there and said that she was for. I'm not sure if she said or if she was misquoted, but she took a stand for the reindeer industry. That's how she was quoted, and I think it was an Expressen. But of course, from an animal rights perspective, it's crystal clear. From an environmental perspective, it's also crystal clear. We need to rewild that land also. We cannot have 260,000 animals killed every year for food that are roaming the land. We need to rewild that area also. Of course, it's the same thing for everybody. Ölandskogar is a very good example. We've talked about the forest in general. This allvaret, you've heard about that, right? Allvaret, that looks very natural, very ancient. It's not. There used to be forest there. We cut that down. Also, when we're talking about biodiversity, Chernobyl is a really, really good example. Chernobyl is the area in Europe with the highest level of biodiversity. Yes, yes it is.
Yeah, it's completely.
Yeah, it's completely radioactivity is dangerous, but people are more dangerous. That's the truth. That is the truth. So yes, when we took away the people, the animals, and the nature started growing there. So that's where we have the highest level of biodiversity. And there's an even more current example of that. For Fukushima, starting to see exactly the same thing happening there. Even though the levels of radioactivity is much higher, they took away the Japanese, the people, the humans. I mean, we're all bad. It's not the Japanese, of course. Yeah. So when we took them away, it started growing again. All right. So this is a summary of the Swedish thing here. We're not best at all of these things. We're rather bad at a lot of different things. And a summary of a summary is that 70% of Swedish farming is animal product. And this is, of course, 100% unnecessary. We don't need any of that because we're not vampires, right? And no, we would not starve. All right.